and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the theme of today's episode is tentativeness. We're going to talk about what might be, and then for one story, what might have been. So the first one actually revolves around Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which seems to have begun in earnest its casting stage. Now this story actually broke a few days ago, but the reason I didn't cover it is that nobody seems to be interested whatsoever in Fantastic Beasts news. Although this news was so out of left field, and seemingly, in my opinion at least, so ridiculous, that maybe that's why it's garnering a little bit more attention than all the other announcements about Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And a number of you asked me to discuss this, so thank you for thinking of me, as always, when you see a trailer or a movie news story. So of course I'm happy to discuss it today, and I think that upon a second glance, it's definitely worth discussing. So they have Eddie Redmayne, of course, as we've known for a while now, is almost certainly going to play the lead character, Newt Scamander. And this takes place like 70 years before the Harry Potter movies, and Newt is going around researching Fantastic Beasts for his textbook, which eventually ends up at Hogwarts in the possession of one Harry Potter. So that's how it all ties in. But his base of operations, apparently he globe or dimension hops. You know, it's obviously, since there's a big magic component here, but his base of operations, or at least where the story starts, seems to be New York City at that time period, which will, I think, be very interesting as well. I mean, if you've seen The Knick, my second time talking about it this week on Cinemax by Steven Soderbergh starring Clive Owen, I think there are some really exciting things you can do with a period piece these days that make it seem a little more real. So I would hope that they would have that element in this movie. But it's a fantasy movie, so I don't know if realism would benefit it that well. So anyway, though, apparently the other main members of the cast are going to be American characters, which is a significant departure for the Harry Potter franchise, which has always prided itself on being very, very British, which I've always admired. I think that British cinema is having a little bit of a renaissance these days. Not only, I think actually largely because of Harry Potter, because not only did that really, I think, have a lot of pride in its UK roots, but then the talent, particularly Daniel Radcliffe, has worked very hard to continue to do UK projects, which I think is very commendable on his part as well. So I'm very curious to see how fans will feel with Harry Potter going American, and it seems to be going a little too American. So we're going to talk about the cast list. It's just for the two, they have 2 boys and 2 girls, although I think the terminology of boy and girl is a little loose here, because they don't seem to be casting any actual children in the roles. But only the girls really are being considered right now, the 2 female roles. And before we get into the specifics on that, I just want to say that one of the great things about the original Harry Potter films is that they really made it an effort, went out of their way to cast the top British talent that was available. You know, they either went with unknowns for the kids, or they cast the creme de la creme of UK actors. It was really like a who's who. It was almost like if you weren't in a Harry Potter movie, you weren't that great a UK actor. So I'm really kind of a little offended that for American roles, for roles that are obviously old enough to get a top actor, they're not going with American, the creme de la creme of American acting talent. And hey, don't you say there isn't any. There is. Even with actresses, yes, I think there is. I don't know how much there is in terms of someone who can bring in box office, but Harry Potter never needed to worry about that in terms of its cast with the actors. It was the property itself, right? Well, maybe this casting list shows to some degree that they don't feel as sure about Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. They're like, maybe they should subtitle it or just change the title to Harry Potter's Textbook and make sure Harry Potter is in the name there somewhere. But actually, I wish that Tomorrowland hadn't been a flop in this regard, because I think that Britt Robertson did a wonderful job playing like a spunky American, really, I think, highlighting the qualities that, America is perhaps stereotypically known for. And I'm sure a lot of you will have some snide remarks to make there as well. But I'm a patriot. I love my country, and I would like to see it portrayed in the best light possible. And I don't think that the actors they're choosing are that great, not to mention some of them aren't even American. So I wish that J.K. Rowling would have as much integrity when it came to the American roles as it did when it came to the UK roles, where she insisted that UK talent be cast. So she's probably like, I'm writing the screenplay, I don't care anymore, I got what I wanted. So I'm sure that's not probably true. I'm sure she's a wonderful person. She's done a lot of charity work, but still, I feel like she dropped the ball here as an American. All right, so who's being considered? Well, for the younger role, apparently it's a younger and older sister, okay? So Saoirse Ronan, let's see if she wants to do this one. She already turned down Scarlet Witch in Avengers: Age of Ultron, which, I don't know, I think Elizabeth Olsen's so good in the role that I'm not complaining, but I think it was a mistake for Saoirse Ronan to do that. Dakota Fanning, she's back in the mix of things. I think she's actually grown up into a pretty darn good actress. I think she went a little off the rails there for a while, trying to find herself. But I saw her in The Last of Robin Hood recently, and she was very good in that movie. Then Lily Simmons from Banshee and Alison Sudol from Transparent. So 2 non-names. So those are the 4 actresses being considered for the younger role. Then for the older sister, you have Katherine Waterston from Inherent Vice. Other people said she did a really good job in that movie. I don't know. That movie was just absolutely horrible in my opinion. Made a much better trailer than it did a movie. And I did not care for her in the film. But you know what? I'd give her a second chance. Then Elizabeth Debicki, who is not American, but was very good in The Great Gatsby. She was the one who almost stole the show with that great line about, "I love big parties, they're so intimate." I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of the line. She's a really talented actress. She's in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. that's coming up with Armie Hammer and Henry Cavill, but she obviously doesn't have as big a role as Alicia Vikander. And then, this was the thing that really made the headline. Kate Upton is being considered for a role in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Obviously, people went to town immediately with playing on the title to play up Kate Upton's particular assets. But that is just such an insult. I mean, I thought Kate Upton was fine in the other Woman. I thought she did a nice job. But that movie knew how to use her. She's not an actress, you know. Kate Upton is, you know, an idea. Something that's popular right now. I do not see her having a long-term career in Hollywood. And I'm glad she's able to, and she's making a lot of money right now, and I hope she's investing it wisely and saving some of it, because I don't see this going on forever. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think that if anyone who's seen her act, can attest, it's unlikely that she's going to have an acting career. Maybe she can go and find something else. Kathy Ireland makes quite a bit of money and is very successful with a clothing line that I believe is available, last I checked, at Kmart, although I think Kmart might be on the verge of going out of business. We'll see. But anyway, I'm sure someone else will pick up her very lucrative clothing line. So I think that thinking of going from, you know, Alan Rickman, Maggie Smith, Kenneth Branagh, etc., to Kate Upton for the American side is just, you know what, like if Kate Upton's in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, I'd be very tempted to be like, I'm out. Peace out. Have fun, David Haven. This is ridiculous. And as an American, I'm insulted. So I'm curious to what you think of these casting choices. Are you excited about them? And you're like, what are you talking about? That's fantastic. I'd love to see Kate Upton on a dragon. Although I'd be like, isn't that more of an ad for like a website company than, you know, a Fantastic Beast, like a movie from Harry Potter, the Harry Potter franchise? But we'll see. We'll see. But I'm very curious to what your thoughts on it are. And also, what do you think it's going to take? Do you think it'll take Kate Upton to get people to start talking about Fantastic Beasts in earnest? Or maybe finally when we get some like concept art or, you know, on-set reports, people will care about it a little bit more. But right now I'm sensing like a Lord of the Rings Hobbit relation. Now, of course, The Hobbit did very well still, but it never really reached the level of Lord of the Rings. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is, you know, poor Channing Tatum. Yes, I want you to feel sorry for Channing Tatum because he is having a heck of a hard time getting his Gambit movie off of the ground. And the clock is running out because it's supposed to come out in October 2016. So he's really got to get on this. But the problem is that not only is he starring as Gambit, but he's also involved very much behind the scenes with the movie, and obviously in choosing a director. And nobody wants to direct Gambit. Here's who he's approached. And the fact that Channing Tatum is approaching these actors, I feel, is really commendable and shows that he's taking this movie very seriously. And I'm really surprised that these directors turned him down, because I think most of them, with one exception, really don't have anything else to do. It would be much better, sorry, I'm still very sick. It would be much better served doing a Gambit movie. I mean, look what this could do for your career if you do a good one. And they might be like, I don't want to do Gambit, you know, stay away from Fox's Marvel movies. But I think Fox has really turned their Marvel movies around, and they could be part of that movement. So he approached Bennett Miller, his director on Foxcatcher. Darren Aronofsky, that's the one person that I'm like, I can see him wanting to go and do something else. But I'd be like, Darren, we'll shoot it right next to your kid's school, because that's why he didn't want to do the Wolverine. He was like, I don't want to go to Australia or the other side of the world for a long period of time. I want to be with my family. But then anyway, he also approached Gareth Evans from The Raid. How on earth is Gareth Evans from The Raid turning down work, especially such high-profile work? Nobody else is hiring this man. He's just sitting at home being like, why is the phone not ringing? Well, it did ring, and you hung up. So I think that's absolutely ridiculous. It makes me care a little bit less that no one's hiring Gareth Evans, because I'm like, someone did want to hire you, and you said no. Then J.C. Chandler from A Most Violent Year. He also did that Robert Redford Storm movie, which was actually pretty darn good. And then also the Wall Street movie from a little bit ago. And actually managed to get some Oscar buzz, even though it was like almost a direct-to-video release. Sorry, I'm so sorry. So anyway, whoa. They all said no. They were like, get lost, Channing Tatum. I don't want to direct your raging Cajun thief story. And that's ridiculous. Now, we've also gotten some other information. It's going to be an origin story. And also Chris Claremont, who created the character along with Jim Lee, did the treatment for the movie. So, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. I think Chris Claremont, his comic book writing these days is just god-awful. It's like unreadable almost. Like, Chris Claremont used to sell comics, but now his name drives me away like the plague. He's worse than Hickman on a comic. I'll read a Hickman comic, and then I'll be like, why do I read Hickman comics? But I won't even read a Chris Claremont comic anymore. But luckily, he didn't actually write the script. That task went to Joshua Zatuber, who wrote, that can't be the correct way to pronounce that, but anyway, he wrote the RoboCop remake that recently came out with Joel Kinnaman and Gary Oldman, which was actually pretty good. So I think this sounds like a pretty good idea. Again, it's an origin story. Gambit's a member of the Thieves Guild, but Channing Tatum has said it's not your typical origin story. He's really trying to make it very interesting and play up the anti-hero aspects of Gambit. So this sounds like a pretty darn good property to me, and I'm really disappointed that this talent won't go on the won't help Channing Tatum out. He did a wonderful job putting together the Magic Mike package, and it looks like he's trying really hard to do the same here. But in this case, they won't let him do it. Maybe you should call him Steven Soderbergh and be like, would you like to direct Gambit? Come on. It'll be a challenge. It'll be fun. You can do an action movie, like a serious special effects action movie. And I think Steven Soderbergh would do a pretty interesting job. But I hope that Channing Tatum is able to get someone of the caliber he's looking for. It doesn't have to get somebody who's going to make this, potentially something that's another misfire for Fox. But I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think these directors were right or wrong to turn down Gambit? And how does the Gambit movie sound to you with this new information? All right, so that's the second story of the day. I'm so sorry. All right, so next up, George Miller's Justice League is back in the news because everybody loves Mad Max Fury Road so much. It's doing quite well at the box office right now. So, again, if you haven't seen it, go see it. Go see it again. I'm planning to see it again. I haven't gotten back to see it yet because there's been a lot of other movies I've needed to see, a lot of press screenings, but I'm planning to see it this coming week again. But it's a wonderful movie, and it's making everybody really curious about his Justice League movie. So they want to make a documentary talking about what might have been, following in the footsteps, as you might recall, of that Tim Burton Nicolas Cage Superman movie documentary, talking about what might have been. Now, I think that got a lot of publicity, but I don't know how many people actually watched it, and it actually hasn't stayed a part of the conversation for comic book fans. But I think that we'll talk about the Justice League information in just a second, but I'd be much more curious about what George Miller is going to do next, which actually BTT viewer Joan Lannister tweeted me and asked me about earlier this week. She said, hey Grace, what do you think about George Miller directing Captain Marvel? I thought that was a pretty good idea, although as I told Joan, he has such a strong relationship with Warner Brothers, he'll likely do something over at Warner Brothers with maybe one of their comic book movies, or maybe another property that they're developing. I would like to see him do anything. I thought he did a wonderful job with Mad Max Fury Road, obviously. So, also, some people are saying, will he do a sequel? I actually had a Twitter conversation about this the other day, and I said, for Mad Max Fury Road to get a sequel, it's probably going to have to gross over $400 million worldwide. And it looks like that's still in the realm of being a possibility. But someone tweeted back and said, oh no, there's already a sequel. It's already going to make the sequel. That's not true. So I just want to clarify that. George Miller has the sequel planned, but Warner Brothers has yet to greenlight it. He doesn't have the go-ahead to actually make it. So he's ready to go, but he doesn't have a green light quite yet. And I think for him to get that green light, the movie will have to gross over $400 million. It would be great if it did close to $500, but if it could do around $400 million and then maybe pick up some award nominations, it'll probably definitely get a sequel. But I also want to talk about, though, Justice League Mortal, which is what the name of the film was going to be. And the reason I want to talk about it is because it doesn't sound that great. So I think that it's important to take Mad Max Fury Road with a grain of salt and be like, hey, George Miller did a fantastic job here. But that doesn't mean he can do a fantastic job at any time. And it doesn't mean we should stop, the system of checks and balances that's supposed to exist in Hollywood, right? I think whenever you let creative talent, be free, and you're like, you're so brilliant, do whatever you want. You get, things that are a little bit of a mess, like what happened to the Wachowskis, or Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, which I enjoyed until the very end. And I think many people feel that way. But perhaps if the studio had been watching him a little more closely, they would have been like, the last quarter of your movie is a mess. You need to fix it because it's going to hurt your reputation and hurt this movie's box office numbers, which it all did. Some of you, I'm sure, will argue it did not hurt his reputation, but I can tell you it hurt his reputation within the industry. And no one will ever give Christopher Nolan that level of creative control again. Maybe if he lets more time pass, which he seems to be doing, he has not announced another project, but Interstellar did really damage him, specifically within the industry. Now, the cast for Justice League Mortal had apparently been put together, so this is who he assembled. Although that's the wrong term, that's over on Marvel. But he had Armie Hammer's Batman, when that obviously did not work out with the Lone Ranger. Someone named DJ Catrota as Superman, who has had very few roles, and I think would not have been a good choice. Megan Gale is Wonder Woman, and actually, as one of you pointed out, she's the woman who's, the bait in Mad Max Fury Road. And I think she actually would have been pretty darn good in the role, so that's a little bit of a shame. Then Adam Brody as the Flash from the OC. Common as Green Lantern. Interesting that he was going to go with Jon Stewart, but I think with all due respect to Common, I think he could get someone better in there. Common's not a bad actor, but I think he's not a good enough actor to compete at the level that these movies should be competing at, right? I mean, Common's kind of like a B or C level movie actor. Then Teresa Palmer as Talia al Ghul. Someone named Santiago Cabrera from Venezuela as Aquaman. Zoe Kazan as Iris Allen. Immortan Joe, Hugh Keys-Byrne as Martian Manhunter. I think that's pretty good. And then Jay Baruchel as Maxwell Lord, who of course we know has an interesting situation with Wonder Woman. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's a really pivotal moment in Wonder Woman's comic book history with Maxwell Lord. But very interesting way to go with that character. And he kind of maybe hints at what they were going to go with there. Maxwell Lord is a villain, a little bit like Lex Luthor Light, and this whole thing kind of seems like Justice League Light to me. I wouldn't let this. If George Miller came to me with these casting ideas, I'd be like, I don't want to make this movie with you anymore. And I just think that perhaps if I were George Miller, I'd be like, you know what? Don't make this documentary because my Justice League perhaps would not have been as great as Mad Max Fury Road, and let's not point that out to people. But I'm curious, what would you like to see George Miller do next? If it's not Mad Max Fury Road 2, what would you like to see him do? How do you think Warner Brothers could best utilize him? He has a very strong relationship with Warner Brothers again, so expect him to stay at that studio. And then how does this Justice League movie sound to you? Does it sound like something you would have watched? Write your thoughts down below. Now, the viewer question today actually comes from Twitter, and this is Maku, aka @TheRealMaku. And Maku says, @Grace Randolph, trying to be a squeaky wheel. And that actually is in reference to some advice I gave here on Morning Movie News, I think a couple of weeks ago now, and that's that sometimes the squeaky wheel does get the grease. So be sure to squeak when necessary. And so I'm very happy that a number of you seem to pick up on that advice because I really do genuinely believe it's good advice. And so when you use it with me, I try to give you a success factor. So Maku, here's some grease. So Maku says, please cover Chris Pratt's preemptive apology. Is the media too quick to judge interviewees? Now, what Maku is talking about is that Chris Pratt recently said, hey guys, I'm really a silly guy, and I'm sure that I'm going to offend people during the press tour for Jurassic World, so get ready for it. And I'm sorry in advance. And I think what Chris Pratt is referencing indirectly is, of course, all the problems that particularly came out of the Avengers press tour. Specifically, Jeremy Renner and Chris Evans talking about Black Widow. But I don't think Chris Pratt was 100% serious there. I think that he was making a joke, which definitely landed. I mean, it got him the headlines that I think it was designed to get. It was a good joke, but I mean, I don't know. Would he have to offend somebody to make the joke follow through? Probably with today's short news cycle, people will forget that he said it. But I think, you know, it got, again, as I said, it got the headlines, and I think he was trying to overall be funny. But as for the question as to the media being too quick to judge interviewees, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that you know, you're doing an interview and you should be professional about it and take it seriously. You know, part of Jeremy Renner's, you know, quasi-apology for what he said was that press tours are long and boring, right? Well, how'd you like not to be on a press tour, Jeremy Renner, or Chris Pratt, or Chris Evans, or anybody? You know, it's really very important to one's career, and you get paid millions of dollars to be in these big blockbuster movies. And part of your job, actually part of an actor's job, no matter what level they're in, and sometimes it's even more important with a small film, is to promote that movie and to get it on people's radar and try and get them to see it. So while you might feel it's tiring and boring to sit through all these interviews, you have to do it, and it's to get a lot of mass coverage for the movie to reach as many people as possible. And all the interviews are scheduled in a row to make it easier for you so that you can go and shoot other movies, right? I mean, if they spread out all the interviews over like a month, you wouldn't be able to get anything done. So it needs to be jam-packed together, and you just need to you know, tough it up and deal with it and go through it. And I don't think a good way to, you know, no one has a problem with lightening the mood and having a good time and having fun with the interviews. But, you know, if you're going to start getting haphazard and a little bit mean and going off the rails and not being on point, even when you're trying to have fun, then, you know, nobody wins, particularly not the talent. So I think that, you know, I think a lot of the actors forget, you know, that I think the interviews become a blur, but they should be very careful about what they're saying in each one and take each one very seriously, because each one is a little gem of an opportunity to convince somebody to see your film, and you don't know which interview someone's going to see. So I think that you should take them all very seriously, no matter what point in the press tour that you're at. And also, I don't think you can blame fatigue for saying something that's, you know, not that great. Now again, as I said when that story broke about Renner and Evans, I didn't think they meant it maliciously. I think they were trying to make a joke, but I don't think they covered the joke very well. And I think the reporter kind of set them up a little bit and didn't help them cover for themselves. She kind of let them dangle there in the wind from their nooses. But, you know, it's a very delicate balance, but it's not the reporter's responsibility at the end of the day. At the end of the day, the responsibility for their image falls solely on the actor, and to some degree their publicist. So be professional, be on point, and take these interviews seriously. They go around, and if you say something really stupid, for sure a lot of people are going to see that interview. So that's my answer to your question, Maku. I think that Chris Pratt was just making a joke to get publicity, which worked. And I think that we're not too quick to judge, and I think that you know, I don't ever have any sympathy for actors who complain about having to do a press tour for a movie for which they were paid millions, and again, for which it's part of their professional responsibility to fulfill that obligation to the film. All right, so thank you, everybody. That's today's Morning Movie News. Thank you for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, any stories you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions that you might have. Bye!